Okay, hi you guys. Wait, hang on. I need to add the mood lighting. There we go. Isn't that better? Yeah. So, 50s Gibson solid bodies are some of the most iconic guitars in the world. 50s Gibson Les Pauls are truly some of the most iconic guitars, in large part because they recorded so much of recorded history, and your job as a musician is about tone. Tone is what it's all about. Anybody can play any guitar, any cheap guitar, but tone is what it's all about. And a lot of tone comes from old wood. So these older Gibsons would have things like smaller headstocks, single piece necks, so the whole neck is one sheet of wood that gives you more resonance. Guitars that have multiple pieces of wood have multiple pieces of wood resonance on them. These guitars made up to 68 have Brazilian rosewood boards, aged maple tops, aged mahogany, and the mahogany comes from older trees. Those trees are, for the most part, 90% gone. So in 1968, Gibson came back with the Les Paul. This is a clean 1968, and it has these features of a small headstock, single piece neck. The neck joint, it comes into the body a little bit. That is called a long tenon, which makes a better connection. Just like a dovetail on an acoustic, it does make a better connection between the body and the neck and makes it more singular. Aged magnets will have an effect on it. The age of the wood will have an effect on it. The choice of woods was pretty dramatic in the 50s. They could reject a lot of wood. Then by 68, less and less so, and certainly by the end of the 70s into the 80s, 90s, less and less so. And now true, genuine mahogany is very rare. You rarely find it. It's listed as genuine mahogany as opposed to African mahogany, Filipino mahogany. That means it's from Honduras, Central America. So these old classics like this are pretty cool. There's some things that happened after 68. In 69, they had a bigger headstock. And so, like this guitar, you can see the two headstocks together, they had a bigger headstock. Then, in 1971, they added a Made in USA stamp. It's just another step in a factory that is growing exponentially, and they couldn't afford to be that choosy. The 50s guitars and exclusively the 68 guitar are really a different genre, but honestly, there was no Les Paul standards until 74 again. So the Les Paul standard, the thing that made, Jimmy Page famous and the bursts and that made in the 50s, they were discontinued by the SG in 1960. And there are no 60s Les Paul standards. There is a 1960, but after that, the 61 through 69, there was no standards. Even up to 1974, very late 73, 74, you'll start to see big humbuckers. I got this guitar, and this is the point of the video. I got this guitar from a dealer called Somewhere in Iowa Guitars, and he had put this aside many, many years ago in the 70s, thinking it was a 68. Back then, there wasn't. It was vague, the information about a 68. But he took this 1970. It's no Made in USA stock. It does have the bigger headstock, but no Made in USA, no volute back here, one-piece mahogany body all the way up, and then a one-piece mahogany here before they started laminating the body. This is actually a really cool guitar. It has a 1970 pot. It's a mix of pots. And then when we got it, it had a lot of that 70s hardware on it, so we tried to modify that a little bit, make it look older and make it look cooler. The neck is pretty slim this way. It's got that thin this way, but wide this way contour. Paul Reed Smith used to call that wide thin on their necks. 1960 Les Pauls are wide thin necks. A friend of ours from St. Louis has these pickups that he put in, and he told me these are like those super hot PAFs. He calls them better buckers. They're custom made pickups. They're a lot of money. They have an aged nickel hardware. And you know what, cameraman? You actually did a lot of this work. Let's switch places really quick, if you don't mind. Here. Seriously, I'll turn that down. You switch. We'll grab the camera, and then So we did age the body a little bit, yes?
So we have a friend who has a secret weapon. We call it the tanning booth. When you have a lacquer finish, when you put it in that UV light, just like leaving it in the sunlight for weeks, months, years, it'll start to fade the paint and make it look a little older. Another thing with this, the bridge pieces here we found, there's a lot of good companies making relic nickel hardware so it doesn't look bright and shiny and brand new, because that's kind of what we're trying to avoid.
So that's repro hardware.
Yep. And the bridge posts from back then were much wider, so those had to be plugged, put in a position for proper intonation, and then reinstalled. This pick guard we got from another aftermarket supplier who does an aged thing with that too.
That pick guard actually came from Germany.
Germany?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But the switch tip's original, got the brown back plates that are kind of period correct for what we're looking for. The tuners had been swapped out at one point. We have an actual vintage set of Gibsons that we managed to put on there. And it's basically what people like me call a player's grade guitar. It's the kind I can afford.
Yeah, there we go. So we baked it. We added all this kind of repro hardware, extra pickups, and then you rewired it all for us?
Yeah, there were some pots that had been replaced. The one we found that was original was dated to 1970. The rest of them, they worked. So the kind of idea with the player's guitars, you just make sure it works. If you got everything, you kind of
yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah, so now this is a something you can take on stage. It's an old Les Paul standard with old PAF sounding pickups. Kind of cool. Play something real quick on our, and we'll exit that way. Nice, nice.